Hi, today I'm going to be talking about how two different civilizations and the opposite sides of the world and more than 2,000 years apart have so much in common. The early civilizations of ancient Egypt and Aztecs emerged in different ecological contexts and in widely separated parts of the globe. Now, how were the patterns of behavior, organization, and technology and their belief related to the challenges that these civilizations were faced with? I'm going to be talking about the Egyptian and Aztec civilizations, their similarities and their differences, and how these ancient civilizations have influenced modern society today. First, I'm going to talk about the ancient Egyptian civilization. Their period was from 3000 BCE to 332 BCE. That included the time from the early dynasty period and the Old Kingdom to the New Kingdom in the late period. They were located in the ancient northeastern Africa. They were a river valley civilization on the Nile River, and most of their ancient population lived alongside the river or in the delta. They were considered self-sufficient with natural resources, stone, both building and decorative, copper, gold, and semi-precious stones. From a political standpoint, they were considered a dynastic monarchy. They had Pharaoh, which was the supreme military commander, and because he was the essential link between the people and their gods, lavish resources were used for the construction of the pyramids and other royal tombs. People looked upon the pharaohs as gods or descendants of God or gods. From a social standpoint, Egypt was physically diverse with no formal class structure, which was different than Mesopotamia. They had their high and low-ranking officials, their priests and other professionals, their peasants, which consisted of the majority of the population, and then finally their slaves. So other than the slaves, men and women were viewed equally under the law, regardless of their social class. Their economy was strictly controlled and centrally organized. Coinage didn't begin until the late period, therefore people were paid with grain initially. Their religion was polytheistic. They had a sun god, Ra, which was their most important god. Cats were also considered sacred, and the domesticated cat became a symbol of grace and voice. They practiced animal sacrifice, and their architecture was phenomenal. Their pyramids, which is one of the most famous structures of the world, were funded by the state for religious and commemorative purposes. They were used for pharaohs' tombs, and they included their possessions for their afterlife. Skilled builders used tools and instruments to move large stones with precision. They acquired substantial knowledge in mathematics and engineering. The Egyptians had a strong agriculture. They had rich fertile soil, which resulted from the annual flooding of the Nile River. And for irrigation, farmers used the flood water to fill basins and canals. This allowed them to create food surplus with little effort. Now, the ancient civilization, their period was from 1325 BCE to 1521 BCE. The Aztecs arrived in Mesoamerica in the early 13th century. They were conquered by the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés, which made the Aztecs the last great native civilization of Mesoamerica. They were located in central Mexico, and their capital city was Tenochtitlan. Unlike Egypt, the Aztecs were not established in a river valley civilization, yet they were close to significant sources of water from Lake Texcoco because they were necessary for the development of the civilization. They were also self-sufficient with natural resources, gold, copper, and clay, and they made stone tools for carving into the gold and the copper that they found. The city was bigger and richer than any city in Spain. At its height, Tenochtitlan had more than 200,000 inhabitants and was the most densely populated city ever to exist in Mesoamerica and the third largest in the world at that time. Their political standpoint was also a monarchy. They had an emperor who had the absolute power and was believed to be a representative of the gods. Beneath the emperor was Tlatoani. They were supreme leaders of city-states. Now, they were the ultimate owners of all the land in his city-state, received tribute, oversaw the markets and temples, led the military, and also resolved judicial disputes. The Aztecs were a highly structured society with a strict caste system. They had the nobles at the top, which consisted of government and military leaders, high-level priests, and lords. Then they had the commoners, which were the farmers, artisans, merchants, and the low-level priests. And then finally were the serfs, which were the indentured servants and the slaves. Women had limited leadership roles. They had administrative roles in the markets and also worked as midwives and priestesses. However, the top administrative positions were limited to men, and women were not permitted to serve as warriors. Slaves had the right to marry, have children, substitute another individual in their place, and even buy their freedom. The interesting part about the Aztecs, I find, is that they were not born slaves. They could not inherit their status from their parents. Pretty cool. Now, their economy was driven by markets. 50,000 people would visit the scrambling markets on major market days. Their religion was also polytheistic, Huitzilopochtli was their god of the sun and war. Ancient Aztec religion was focused on how the gods, human and nature interconnected. There was a strong emphasis on the worship of their sun god. They practiced human sacrifice, and the military conquests and ritual sacrifices were focused on helping their sun god keep the sun strong and keep disaster away. Similar to the Egyptians, the Aztecs also built pyramids and temples in numbers, from the largest temple, the Templo Mayor, to the sun and moon pyramids, which still stand proud today. These temples perfectly represent how the Aztecs' architecture was powered by their desire to sacrifice to their gods, their religion, and beliefs. They would take out their victim's heart while it was still beating and then throw the bodies down the pyramid stairs. The Aztec architecture relied heavily on cosmology, astronomy, and religion. They had skilled builders that used primitive tools like stones, chisels, and blades for their constructions. For agriculture, they had intensive cultivation of arable land. They drained the swampy lands and constructed artificial islands on which they could plant gardens. Now, the similarities and differences between these two civilizations. First, their similarities. Both Egyptian and Aztec civilizations developed in relative isolation with little or no contact with outside civilizations. Their religion was polytheistic. Both civilizations had a sun god, and the rulers in both cultures legitimized their authority religiously. That resulted in people working for them without question. As a matter of fact, in the Aztec civilization, people thought it was an honor to be sacrificed. They also had similar architecture. Both built pyramids and temples. The base of the Aztec pyramid of the sun matches to within inches to the Egyptian pyramid of Khafre. It is also believed that the three major temples in the ancient Egypt and the ones in Mexico are in the same layout as the Stars and Orion's belt. They both had labor specialization with craftsmen who created cloth, pottery, metal, and other products. Now, what's interesting for me is that they both created a two-calendar system. They had their sacred calendar, which was used to keep track of the days meant for certain gods and their rituals. And then they had their agriculture calendar, which was used to keep track of the best days to begin planting or to start harvesting their crops. Now, the reasons for their similarities, I find, is intellect. Although scholars might disagree, it is very possible that just like Columbus and other explorers discovered America, Egyptians could have sailed across way before that time and began a civilization here with their existing knowledge that they could pass on. Others give credits to aliens, but what is true is that they both were intellect in astronomy, concept of zero, mathematics, and writing. This intelligence is the reason for many of their similarities. With their ability to write and keep track, it is no surprise how they both came up with an agriculture calendar. Tracking when the sun came out, which happens to be the same sun in both hemispheres, and combining with the days of rain over a period of time allowed both civilizations to come up with similar calendars. Imagine that. Now the differences. Despite both being monarchies, Egypt, being an earlier civilization, developed strong central governments. The Aztecs had decentralized governments. There was also a drastic difference in the length of civilization. The Egyptian civilization lasted almost 3,000 years. It is considered one of the 6 civilizations to arise independently and ended with the conqueror of Alexander the Great in 332 BCE, which later came under the Roman Empire. The Aztec civilization only lasted less than 200 years. Unlike Egypt, it was a continuation of earlier Olmec, Chavin, and Mayan Mesoamerican civilizations and ended in 1521 with the conquest of Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés. Although both civilizations excelled in agriculture, they also had some differences. Egypt was home to a large number of plants and animals that were suited for domestication, while the Aztecs, on the other hand, had fewer wild plants and animal species that could be domesticated. Now, the reasons for these differences are location and climate. The natural east-to-west axis of Europe allowed for the rapid spread of domesticated plants and animals. For the Aztecs, in contrast, the variations in climate at different latitudes from the north and south axis made it difficult for the spread of domesticated species. Also, different times. Aztecs were a continuation of other civilizations in Mesoamerica who, because of the time of exploration, were conquered by the Spanish shortly after their civilization began. The Egyptian civilization, in contrast, began long before and had more time to grow and get strong without being conquered. So how have these ancient cultures influenced modern society? Influences of Egyptian civilizations. Intellect is by far one of the biggest contributions. Egyptians were remarkable at mathematics. Not only did they have efficient ways of performing multiplication and division, but the earliest records of geometry came from Egypt, where they used rope to calculate areas of land. Writing. The idea of a phonetic alphabet and where sound is represented by a symbol came from Egypt. Medicine. The Egyptians not only treated wounds with herbs and ground up parts of animals, but they also recorded these with their convenient writing methods. Entertainment. The Egyptians invented many sports like archery, swimming, and boxing. And also religious. They invented religion, which impacts people drastically today in everyday activities, including performing funeral services. Now, the influences of Aztec civilizations. Just like the Egyptians, the Aztecs also contributed from an intellect standpoint. Aztecs used herbs and flowers to create medicines, to reduce pain and prevent muscle spasms. The agave plant, which they used to disinfect wounds, is still used today to kill E. coli bacteria. There are multiple herbal companies today like Herbalife, Mother Earth Living, Essential Oils, just to name a few. Aztecs were also the first empire that required mandatory education for children, regardless of the gender or social status. Today, we are proud to say that America is one of the countries that makes education mandatory, at least until a certain age. Food. The drinking of coca was a symbol and status of wealth for the Aztecs. It was even used as currency. Emperor Montezuma had billions of coca beans upon the arrival of Hernán Cortés. Today's world without chocolate cake is unimaginable. Tobacco was also considered to be the physical incarnation of one of their gods. It was consumed via smoking, snuffing, and drinking. Today, it is one of the most consumed drugs. We can call this a negative contribution. So in conclusion, I discussed the Egyptian and the Aztec civilizations, their similarities and their differences, and how these ancient civilizations influence modern society. So, in closing, the developed patterns of behavior, organization, technology, and belief were in large part responses to the challenges and opportunities of those environments. Regardless of the many theories as to the differences and similarities among these two ancient civilizations, not only did they both use a range of technologies, ideas, and sciences that enabled them to meet their challenges of their environments, they also left behind many positive contributions that impact our lives today. Thank you.